about cheating around the edges. This club has had a couple of rats in its ranks.
As time goes on and all the facts become clear, people can make their own determination.
The Storm has engaged in a long-term system of operating what might conveniently be called two sets of books.
We are not going anywhere. We ain't going to surrender.
Duffy can score a try and will dive into the corner.
And now, the presenter of Insight, Jenny Brocky.
Hi, thanks for joining us. As sports rorts go, it's right up there. The nation's top rugby league team found cheating by paying the best players more than it's allowed to under the salary cap system. The Melbourne Storm has been fined, stripped of its 2 premierships, denied any points in the current season and forced to play the rest of its games for pride alone. For fans and players, it's heartbreaking. So what is going on in rugby league? Does the salary cap designed to spread the top players around the teams need to change? Tonight, the business of rugby league, and you can join in via our website, Facebook and Twitter. Welcome everybody, good to have you all here. A lot of people in their colours, I see. Steve Forreston, I'd like to start with you. You're the CEO of the Knights, the Newcastle Knights. You were at a meeting of CEOs today, which has reaffirmed support for the rugby league salary cap. Is anything going to change as a result of what's happened in the Storm, with the Storm?
Well, change is possible. I guess a very good meeting, a lot of good discussion. What's come out of that is we've asked each club to submit within 2 weeks what they believe the changes that are necessary to the salary cap. Committee's been formed to review that and then put recommendations through to the board of the NRL. I guess the salary cap is an essential thing. You know, we've got to understand that there was only about 4 or 5 NRL clubs that were profitable in 2009. So most of those are not in a situation where they could afford a greater salary cap. So the important thing is that we look after the clubs and we make sure that all 16 clubs are profitable. And I guess that brings back the independent commission and the need to accelerate that and get it happening faster and sooner rather than later.
Okay, I want to get on to the salary cap in detail a bit later on tonight, but before I do, are there things that you think need to change in rugby league right now?
I think if we're talking from a salary cap point of view, providing the clubs are financial and they can afford it, yes, we need to keep our players in the game. But right at the moment, if you don't have the money in the pocket, you can't spend it. The other thing that I would like to see is long-term players. You know, when you develop a player, you have them at your club for 10 or more years, you've had them there since they were 16. To force them away at the end of their career, I think, is a negative thing for our game. We also don't want to lose the best of our talent. I think what it says is we're doing very good at developing young players because every code is after those players. So we're doing a good job of that, but we need to be able to maintain those players and keep them within our game.
Okay, we'll get on to some of that in detail later on, as I said. But before we do, I just want to go back over a bit of what's happened. Jason Taylor, now you're a former top league player.
We have watched this routine many times. And it has worked many times and again tonight. At half-time, 5 to go for Jason Taylor.
Is it conceivable to you, as a top player, that you wouldn't know your contract was rorting the system, that you were getting more than you appeared to be getting on paper? Is it conceivable to you as a player that you wouldn't know that?
Well, it's slightly possible, but from my experiences, I certainly knew along my whole career exactly where I was getting paid from and what I was signing. So, you know, I could see how it's possible that players could be unaware of some things that were going on, but I do find it hard to believe.
You find it hard to believe that the players wouldn't know?
I think they would definitely know something.
Are you surprised by what's happened with the Storm?
No, not at all.
Why?
Just from being in and around the game over the period that I have, just through knowing what goes on, both experiences that I've seen and heard about.
What sort of things, Jason?
Oh, just the sort of thing that we're seeing. This is a much bigger scale than anything I've ever been aware of, but it's just happening. People.
But what's happening? What kinds of things are happening?
Players are being paid, you know, in the back pocket. Payments.
I know the best that you possibly can about the running of your business, You know, the Storm situation is not a situation that you're talking about. What you're talking about when clubs are a little bit over, as Steve said, that's like someone doing 65 in a 60 zone. You know, to use an expression someone used today, what Storm did was 140 in a stolen car that they did for 4 years and said I was just speeding because everyone else was. Now, I just think that's not a story about salary cap. That's a story about cheating, about lying and about rorts, which can happen in any business, irrespective of whether you've got a salary cap or not. That's just people choosing to cheat.
Brian Waldron was the Melbourne Storm boss at the time of these breaches.
Had he been hung out to dry? Oh, look, that's not for me to judge. Sorry, it's not for others to, for me to say, it's for others to judge.
Do you believe he was the only one who knew what was going on?
Oh, look, it's very complex. I would just be speculating.
Well, everyone else is. You might as well join them.
That's not my job. Ask these guys. Ask these guys.
But you run a football team, and that's the question.
Wait a sec. I'm a member of a football club.
Team.
I'm an owner. Okay. Professionals run it. Good people run it.
Okay. You own a football team, but that's what people want to know. I mean, that is what people want to know. How many people knew about this, about what was going on? I mean, Jason's saying that he thinks players know what they get. I mean, what do the rest of you think? Do you think Brian Waldron was the only one who knew?
Look, I think Jason's right, but I think Paul made the point as well. The cap is an aggregate salary that you have to stay under for all your players. So if you have 25 players, each of them have got a contract, they don't necessarily know, although there's a bunch of agents that represent a lot of them, no one in the outside world knows the aggregate. No one player that puts a club over the edge, if it's just the aggregate part, if it's just their salary that puts them over the edge, no one player is responsible for the club breaching their salary cap. If it's a side letter that is separately signed or a dummy contract, that's a separate matter. But just adding up the aggregate of those contracts, that's just only the club really knows that.
Anyone else like to buy this, Steve?
This is the first time Jason and Peter have seen each other since Jason left South, and Jason's obviously made some pretty explosive comments earlier in this program. I think we probably should ask him whether he saw any evidence of this when he was working under Peter at South.
Yeah, I was going to ask him that.
No.
No?
No evidence, no.
Suspicions? Concerns?
Oh, things like this were discussed, but...
things like what were discussed?
Things like paying players outside of the salary cap. It's a topic of conversation at football clubs. You know,
so what, the topic of conversation, what, how you get around it, or what is it?
There's conversation that goes on when you have a meeting about salary cap and talk about, you know, people in a meeting make comments like, you know, are we going to have a look at doing some stuff outside the cap? Now, to my knowledge, going forward in the time that I was South, that didn't happen, but I was at a meeting where that comment was made.
You were at a meeting where that comment was made?
Yes.
Okay, and
Peter, it wasn't made by Peter, I hasten to add.
Yeah. Peter, do you want to respond to that? Who was at that meeting?
Look, I think Jason's chosen his words very carefully, but I think it's important that we do. South Sydney Rabbitohs have taken our position on ethical behaviour with regards to our players, with regards to how we've rebuilt our club, with regards to the community very, very seriously. And any suggestion that we've considered paying over the cap, people might have said it in a room, to which our strong answer was, not in your lifetime.
And
that's what I'm saying.
And you could be accused of sour grapes, Jason, over this, because you were sacked by South Sydney.
Absolutely. And what Peter said there is what I'm saying. It was a comment that was made, and it was made clear that we wouldn't be doing that, and everybody got on with life. But I'm just making the point that that was raised.
It was raised.
Absolutely.
Okay.
There should be.
Brad, do you want to buy into this? I mean, how widespread do you think this problem is?
Look, it's obviously very tempting for everyone to look at ways that they can cheat the salary cap. The competition's so even and so tight that you only need to spend maybe $200,000 or $300,000 outside the salary cap. You've got yourself another marquee player, and that could be the difference between winning or losing the competition. But in terms of the Melbourne Storm and who knew, the chairman and the chief executive of each club sign a statutory declaration at the beginning and the end of each season, which is given to the NRL, stating that their affairs regarding the salary cap are in order and that everything is above board. And so Brian Waldron, the question's been asked, did he know? Well, the chairman signed a statutory declaration on behalf of the board. Did he know? If he didn't know, why didn't he know? And do other board members know? And the CFO or the acting chief executive, he's resigned. He admitted he knew. He had files at his house that had been passed on to Brian Waldron. I suppose the question is, did someone pass them on to Brian Waldron when he took over the job?
And just to follow up Candy's point that a player and his agent said, please include this in the cap. Now I ask Sam, why would you ask for something to be included in the cap if you didn't suspect it wouldn't be?
I was just going to make a point. I mean, you come to terms with a CEO on a contract for a player, and let's say, for argument's sake, you agree to a $250,000 contract. 2 weeks later, the CEO then provides you with a contract for $200,000 and another document, which is a legal third-party agreement that the club has sourced for the player.
And this is the money that a player can earn right outside arm's length from the club.
Third-party agreement. As far as we're concerned, they've derived and procured that agreement legitimately and said, here, we're going to pay you $200 on contract, playing contract, through the club's, under the club salary cap, and $50 as a third-party agreement. So from our point of view, myself and the player, we say, yeah, why not? That's not a problem, as long as we're getting the $250 that we agreed to. And then all of a sudden, without our knowledge, they don't send that third-party agreement and register it with the NRL. That's something that we don't have control of. So if that takes place, the club could be cheating the cap without ours or the players' knowledge, and that's taken place a few times.
Well, that's one of the problems with Melbourne, though, was they were guaranteeing third-party agreements, which is illegal. And that's you cannot guarantee a third-party agreement.
I agree, but
because it's not arm's length.
Yeah, no, but I agree that they can't guarantee it. They can procure it and provide it, but if that person doesn't pay it, them paying it becomes the guarantee. If that doesn't take place, then the fact that they haven't registered it with the NRL means that we're not to know that it's not a legitimate third-party agreement.
George Illawarra couldn't guarantee a third-party agreement to Mark Gasnier. It's the very reason that he was lost to rugby league and went to play rugby union in France.
And people ask the question now of me on a regular basis, why haven't we finalised Jonathan Thurston's contract? Because we're legitimately sourcing third-party agreements that we can put into place to bridge the gap between what he can earn here and what he can earn overseas. If we weren't sourcing those agreements, and if we were just delaying and carrying on, then the Cowboys would be entitled to say, well, we're going to pull that contract and we're not happy, and they'd be jumping up and down. But they know what we're doing because we're doing it legitimately and above board.
Okay, quickly, Brad, just before we go to break.
It's my understanding that guaranteed third-party deals can be included in the salary cap. The clubs can guarantee third-party deals, but they've got to include that amount in the salary cap. Exactly. And that's what the Melbourne Storm weren't doing.
And the Cameron Smith case in
particular. And that's the point. That's where the distinction has to be made.
Okay, well, coming up, we're going to look at the power behind the league and whether it's good for the game. That's next on Insight. Tonight we're looking at rugby league. We're going to talk a bit about the way that league is run and what the Melbourne Storm incident tells us about all of that. But before we do, I want to hear from some fans, actually. Angie, you're here. You're a Storm fan. You're here with your kids. What do you think of the penalties that have been imposed on your team, first of all, and especially not being able to play for points this season?
Not being able to play for points. The guys are playing for pride, and they're playing for themselves, and they're playing for their supporters. So, in a sense, that's even better. We're just going to show everybody that if we can't win points, no one else is going to either. And as far as, what was the first part of that?
How do you feel about the penalties?
I don't understand how you can take someone to court, and before everything is finalised and you've gone through the whole system, that you then dish out the penalties. It's like going to court and saying, right, well, I think I'm going to charge you with this, this and this, so I'm going to penalise you now before we actually finish the full proceedings.
Matthew, you're a Bulldogs fan. What do you think about it?
I don't think it's fair that Melbourne don't get any points for the rest of the season because, you know, I'd like to see the Bulldogs beat the Storm, but at the same time, if they're going to have a good team, they deserve to win, but there's no point in them playing if they can't get any points. I think it's slack for all the supporters, and I think all the politics need to end and resolve this problem to make it a fair competition.
Jodie, you're a Parramatta fan. You lost the premiership last year to the Storm. What do you think of the penalty?
The penalty, well, being a Parramatta fan, I felt ripped off for losing the grand final last year. I mean, we lost on the day to a team that was obviously better than us, but to actually find out that they were fielding a team which was above the salary cap, I feel robbed. So I'm quite happy that they've had the premiership taken off them.
And being stripped of points?
Stripped of points, I don't sort of agree with that, because obviously for the fans, and they are playing for pride, if they had the opportunity to, say, remove some players and actually put a proper side on the field and actually join the competition again, I think that'd be a little bit more fairer.
Okay. Yeah, Steve, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, there's probably no right answer to this, but I mean, if this had happened in round 20, as happened to the Bulldogs some years ago, all points would be stripped anyhow. So the issue is not about stripping of the points, that's a right penalty. The issue comes about a team playing all year for nothing, but we're talking about an Australian team this weekend, which, you know, have several players in both camps from the Melbourne Storm. We then talk about state of origin, we talk about Four Nations at the end of the year. These players do have something to play, and this lady brings a great point about the pride and making sure that other people don't. There's no right answer to this, but if you shed players and take those players out, and we're now talking a number, I understand, that's growing, and for 2010 it's 1.3 million or more. If we're talking a number like that, we're talking several players. Where do those players get accommodated? There are only 2 clubs in the NRL, to my knowledge, that are under the salary cap. That's ourselves and Brisbane Broncos, and we might be able to take 1 each. So do we lose those players to the game because we make them cut back? What happens then to those players? There's no right answer in this.
Okay, Gary, you're the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs team's biggest sponsor, and you've spent $25,000 on a full-page ad attacking David Gallop and the NRL's penalty against the Storm. Why? Why are you spending all that money on an ad?
Well, first of all, I don't have a media profile, so I can't just call a press release and...
You do now.
I do now. It was worth the money. I had to do that to get some public... That's not my arm, by the way.
No, it's not your arm. It's not your arm. But it's a very angry ad. It's a very angry ad.
It was because I was outraged. I mean, the fact is that Melbourne Storm cheated. It's quite clear from what's already happened tonight. The salary cap is unbelievable. That was a Freudian slip. The salary cap is unbelievably complicated to the point where owners of clubs can't even keep track of the thing, and they get fined for making an honest mistake. Now, Melbourne's mistake was far, far worse than that. But what you're trying to do, and Canterbury did it in 2002, it's against human nature with the pressure to win to try to stop this with this incredibly complex system. And the fact is that Ian Schubert did a great job finding it, but he was really tipped into it. Melbourne
it was a whistleblower.
Yeah, it was a whistleblower. They could have got away with this. And what I'm saying is the salary cap doesn't work. It needs to be rejigged. I actually think in principle it should be allowed to work, but it should have to work with a draw. Now that's got serious problems, but it works in Melbourne and it works in other leagues. There is no salary cap on its own around the world that doesn't work in conjunction with a draw. A draft, sorry. And the fact is that I think that punishing Melbourne by not allowing them to earn any points this year creates a raft of problems.
Okay, Brad.
Gary, like the Bulldogs in 2002, Melbourne have been involved in systematic cheating. They've set up, they've had fake invoices. They've set up companies at arm's length to hide payments outside of the salary cap. And as a Bulldog supporter, how would you feel if Melbourne, with a team that's over the salary cap by possibly $1 million this year, were to beat the Bulldogs in the grand final?
The thing that I say is that David Gallop's looking at this down the wrong end of the tube. He should be trying to get clubs to play and aspire to the standards of quality that Melbourne play to, rather than drag them down to the mediocrity.
Everyone else should cheat.
No, it's got nothing to do with cheating.
It's about Melbourne aspiring and reaching a level of excellence. It's just rubbish that's been put out by people who want to get the salary cap driven out of the game, because Melbourne have reached a level of excellence based on unfair recruitment. And that is the whole idea.
Particularly if everybody else has been trying to work within the boundaries to some degree.
What about Greg Inglis and the young players they've developed?
What's the point of having a level of excellence where there's only 2 teams left in the comp because the rest have all gone broke? Yeah, 2 great teams.
Okay, Fan over here, yep.
I'd just like to say, you're saying unfair recruitment. We made those players. We recruited them when they were 18.
Okay, one at a time. Let her finish. Yep.
We recruited these players when they were young and they were nothing. and we made them what they are today.
They weren't nothing. They
How
were
many
the
guys
best
from Melbourne
footballers in
answer
their
that,
age
Paul?
group at the time,
Okay.
and Melbourne were able to buy them through the power of money.
But we have developed them.
Okay, one at a time. Steve.
I was just about to make the point that they were recruited very well. They were, as Kenny said, they were champion junior players, a lot of them from northern New South Wales and Queensland. But if you're actually talking about producing players from the local league, the West Australian Rugby League has actually produced more first graders than Victorian Rugby League. We are now, as far as Melbourne are concerned, we're what, 12, 13, 14 years into their history, and they haven't produced one local first grader yet.
Okay, all right, just very quickly, Steve.
They have. They've got New South Wales based
this has been
players.
thrown around about developing players. These two guys are spot on. You know, you develop a player from the time you bring him to your club at 14 or 15. You know, Greg Inglis was playing in Newcastle at 15. It's garbage that he was developed. You know, people who throw around, you buy a player at 18 and 19 and he debuts for you, so therefore you've developed it. Take clubs like Penrith, Parramatta, Canberra, Newcastle. They start development at 7 years of age through their junior leagues and through their schools. They bring people in at 14 years of age and play them through Matthews Cup, SG Ball, what used to be Jersey Flegg and so on. That we are talking about a club that developed players here. We're talking someone who went out, looked at school championships and things and recruited the best players available with money. They overspent and then kept those guys when they become first graders.
Okay, can we broaden this out just a little bit at this point, because we'll come back to the salary cap in a moment. But Brad, I want to ask you what you think this whole episode tells us about the way rugby league is run at the moment.
Just what it does, it's highlighted the conflict of interest that News Limited has got right across the game. They own the Melbourne Storm, 50% stakeholder in the NRL, 50% stakeholder in the pay TV broadcaster. At every level of this,
and the Broncos, they've got
and the Broncos, every level of this story, News Limited are involved, and there's conflict of interest. They're handing out the penalties or telling the players that we're not going to appeal against the penalties. They're representing the club. Every time someone from News Limited sticks their head up, as John Hartigan did, who's he representing? Is he representing News Limited, the Melbourne Storm? I feel like the Melbourne Storm players, I think that they would feel that they haven't been represented in this, that they don't know what's going on, and they feel that nobody's out there fighting for their rights. And just developing as a sport, we're at a period now where we're going from a local sport to a national sport, where American baseball was in the 1950s. So we're trying to treat every club equally, but there's enormous inequalities. We do have a socialist system. It is socialist, but it's absolutely essential for the survival and evolution of the game, because we are in a transient period.
Okay, but Paul, you're a News Limited journalist. What's your response to this hopeless conflict of interest for News Limited?
I don't think it's hopeless. Look, you've got to ask, where has there been a wrong decision made in this? And until someone can actually categorically prove that there's been a wrong decision made in this, I don't think there has been a conflict of interest.
To stop the Storm from earning points
I
this
think
year.
that's
a wrong decision.
Why should they be allowed to earn points?
It all comes from that. There's hardly any complaint about the other parts of the fine.
Why should they be allowed to play
team allowed to play for points?
That's right. He doesn't solve the problem by making this decision.
Okay, Peter, can I get a comment from you about News's fingers in all these pies? I mean, do you think that's an issue for the league, for the game of rugby league, for News to have that much influence?
You got a salary cap. Let's talk about that. That's a game equalisation strategy. You can have a draft, you can have a cap, you can have a combination of it. That's a separate issue. That's got nothing to do with News. You've got the Melbourne Storm, rorting down there in Melbourne. Do I think that's a particular News Corp, issue? I actually don't, because I haven't been around the game for a little while. I know that News were much more vocal, internal and to their people, that you better not be doing anything illegal, because we're a corporate, we have a whole bunch of governance issues, and don't do anything illegal. I heard more from them than any other club, than any other place, than any other owner, than any other league club director. So what went wrong
then, this spectacular breach? I mean, what went wrong if that was the case?
Sorry. When you have, let me say, I've been involved in companies where you've had staff systematically, rorting you. It is virtually impossible to pick up, because they're the people that tell the auditors where the money is. They're the people that cover their tracks. They eventually all get caught. Or as far as I can tell. But it takes a while, and they can cover it up for a while. And there's always a whistleblower, when someone's on their scent. Let's make that very clear.
Brad, is it just sour grapes from you because you're from Fairfax?
No, Look, the game's moving towards an independent commission, and it needs to do so as quickly as possible.
Very quickly.
For those reasons, because News Limited feels conflicted, and this has just highlighted the conflicts they have. Their tentacles are everywhere.
And they support the independent commission.
Yeah, and
absolutely.
Look, and
they are driving it as quickly as is reasonable towards an independent commission, which is positive.
If News Limited didn't own the Melbourne Storm probably would have died.
Well, that was going to be my next point. They've poured a lot of money into the league as well,
$6 million
yeah?
a year.
Sam.
No, the game comes out of the NRL's $8 million
The point about News Limited is I can see exactly where Brad's coming from, but you'd rather their money and their resources in the game than not in the game. So that's one important thing, because they have done a lot for rugby league, and their media resources provide rugby league with with good exposure.
Well, you would, because you're an agent. You'd certainly want to see their mony in there.
Well, but everybody does. We're arguing about the crux of the issue is the salary cap and the way that it's structured, and it doesn't provide leeway and concessions for clubs to be able to retain some of their good stars. And I take the young lady's point up there, that they saw these young players get developed and come through, so they feel ownership of those players. And then the last thing they want to do is see those players rated by rugby union or AFL. There's a great deal of pressure on the clubs to retain those players.
Okay.
They may have to cheat.
Up the back, yeah.
There's a few comments that have been spoken about over in this corner about an issue of sort of a socialist kind of perspective in terms of the way the game is running. And I envisage that is important for some of those clubs to stay alive. But there's also an issue of expansion. Like capitalism works, there's always a need to move forward and expand. And I don't think that these weak teams, no matter what you put them in, these socialist or these capitalist markets, they're gonna hold the game back nevertheless. And it does hurt, and a lot of fans will get upset at these kind of comments. But it's the truth, and sometimes the truth hurts. And I think it's important that we do move forward upon this, and we see the weaknesses in the salary cap. Yes, it is limiting, and there's been categorical breaches, as has been stated, which have been technicalities and not actually cheating. But that just shows that there are clubs who are not operating at a profit who are also still breaching the salary cap. So how is that saying that these clubs cannot afford to go any further?
Okay, Steve, would an independent commission solve some of these issues? Do you think?
Well, you would hope so. I mean, one interesting thing, I'd like to see the concessions given to the Sydney Swans, as far as put a value on them, because they have an independent commission running the AFL. They make decisions in the interest of the game purely, or that's the way it's supposed to work. I'd like to see the concessions given to the Sydney Swans over the years put alongside the Melbourne Storm salary cap breaches. I think the Melbourne Storm salary cap breaches would be much bigger. But obviously, the AFL, because they have a commission, they make decisions in the interest of the game. Expansion is in the interest of the game. Whereas in rugby league, we have to, because the clubs are so powerful, we have to treat every club equally, because there's this enormous political pressure to do so. So I think one thing we're going to see down the track, not straight away with the commission, is that perhaps we will see AFL-type concessions for expansion teams.
Okay. Well, meanwhile, what to do about the salary cap in between when the independent commission happens? We'll talk more about the salary cap next on Insight. Tonight we're talking about the business of rugby league, and all roads lead to the salary cap, it seems. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Sam, the cap's designed to spread the top players around. You're currently negotiating Jonathan Thurston's contract, and he's in hot demand, obviously. Do you think the cap is working as it stands?
Let me make the point that there is a strong necessity to have a salary cap. I believe in the salary cap. But what I don't like to see is a guy like Petro Civoniceva finish his career at Penrith, or a guy like Steve Price have to leave the Bulldogs and finish his career at the Warriors. It's created a lot of disloyalty because of the fact that clubs don't get concessions to be able to retain these players. It brings me back to the point of the young lady over there. It's really important for them to see young players come through, that their clubs have an opportunity to retain them. So they go out and they cheat the cap. It's a great product. Rugby league at the moment, the ratings are sky high. It's like building a brand new freeway and putting a 65-kilometre speed limit on it. More people are going to break the rules.
Mm. So what are you saying? It forces people to cheat?
It does force people to cheat, obviously, and it's blatantly obvious.
Peter?
Nothing forces people to cheat. Let's be really serious about it.
Winning and achieving forces people to cheat.
People make a decision to cheat. Sport is a study of people under pressure. And some people under pressure, whether they're doctors or lawyers or taxi drivers, if they're really under pressure, they cheat. But you cannot blame the system for people cheating.
Is the salary cap working?
We've got a very good competition. it could be better and it will improve, and we need to get more money into the game so that salaries can rise for the players. We've got a very even competition.
But it's a rorted competition, or it has been. I mean, we've had a rort exposed.
No,
I think we've had one situation where we've had a rort, and I don't think we can generalise in that. We've had one some years ago. I agree with Peter. You've only got to look at banks, and banks have the best auditing systems in the world. Yet every now and then someone rips off millions, sometimes even billions.
Hundreds of millions of dollars people steal from banks.
And they eventually get caught. It's people rather than the individual clubs or the competition.
Now, originally the salary cap was there to protect clubs and sporting organisations from themselves because they were spending too much money. But when you said it's there to spread the talent around, I didn't see anyone throwing their chairs at you. Everyone agrees it's there to spread the talent around. We had 8 premiers in 12 years. After 4.5 weeks of this year's NRL, everyone had won and everyone had lost. So if the salary cap is there to even up the competition, case closed. It works.
Okay, does it work, Andrew?
Look, I think it needs to be tweaked. And we're sitting in the middle of something that proves that. Equalisation...
Tweaked in what way, though?
Well, if equalisation of the playing talent is imperative, then, you know, I've seen different models bandied around. Bruno Cullen with his concessions and Damien Irvine's point system. I know they're both not right, but there's a couple of guys who are actually putting more into trying to fix and try and find a solution to the problem as opposed to, you know, CEOs or heads of the game sort of saying it's all too hard and we've tried this in the past and it hasn't worked. So I think if we're going to be serious about this, we need to try and make some adjustments to it.
Okay, Jess?
I think the standards are dropping this season. At the start of the year, there were some great games every week, and it's dropping. There's some games at the moment that I don't look forward to watching, and you did a few years ago. Just in relation...
In case you didn't hear that at home, one of the Storm fans said, come to the Storm games, you'll enjoy it.
In relation to the Storm and everything that was talked about before, I can guarantee you from a coaching perspective, they raised the bar on the competition over the last 4 or 5 years. They raised the bar and everybody was aspiring to be up where the Storm was. When they get disbanded, firstly, we've got to make sure we can keep these talented players in the game, and secondly, if the bar drops and if the clubs who are currently doing a bit of what the Storm do over the next period, they drop off as well and everybody is under the salary cap, then the standard is going to be lower and the game isn't going to be as exciting as it is or was just last season, in my opinion.
What was it like coaching against the Storm?
Well, it was tough. You know, when you woke up on Monday morning after playing on the weekend, you knew you were playing the Melbourne Storm this weekend. You knew that everything you did that week had to be twice as good, if that was possible. You know, you work hard every week, but everyone in your club just knew we have to go another 2 levels this week or else we'll get beaten by 40 points. They lifted the standard of the competition over the last number of years.
Let me ask a question. Would anybody here like their income and salary capped? If they were producing for their employer and doing a great job.
Broke without the cash.
Absolutely.
Yes.
No, I agree.
And
but I made the point that there has to be a cap, but there has to be some concession and leeway. At the moment, we've got challenges from rugby union, we've got challenges from AFL. All of a sudden, there's a greater demand. So that's what's forcing it up. I mean, it's natural attrition. I mean, in a sense.
Well, obviously, if we get an independent commission, the $8 million a year, this is Brad's point, not mine. I won't take credit for it. The $8 million a year that used to go to New Zealand every year will go back into the game. So that's $500,000 per club straight away.
If Melbourne have cheated the cap by 7, 8, 900 million, as you're saying, that means there is money there. Why don't we find ways to legitimise that money and spend it?
It's News Limited money. There's not money there, and what you've got is a very lopsided... Well, they've been putting $6 million a year in there. It's very lopsided organisation that we have here. What we've got to understand is that we have clubs that couldn't survive. We won't have a competition. You take away the salary cap, you open all this up, you open up a competition that will have 3 or 4 teams that dominate, and eventually the others will drop off. There will be no competition. What we've got to make sure is that the clubs are healthy first. It's all about affordability. Everybody wants the salary cap to have more money in it, and we want to keep these players, but no individual is greater than the game. We've got to look after the game first.
Gary?
Nobody's really seriously suggesting you abandon the salary cap. No. That's an insane idea going back to the old days. I was a West Tiger supporter, West Magpie supporter, and I used to see all our best players go off to Manly at the end of the season. It used to break my heart. I still hate Manly. The fact of the matter is...
Most people do.
The fact of the matter is that you must have a salary cap. It's obvious that you must have a salary cap. when John Quayle first moved to the salary cap scheme, he never thought of it without having a draw involved in it. A draft. I keep saying draw, sorry. A draft involved in it. And it was broken up by a court case. But it works in Victoria. They keep it together with a bit of goodwill. We need a bit of goodwill between the Players Association.
I only got one sentence because I know everyone wants to talk. It is a staggering achievement on the part of the NRL to have 8 premiers in 12 years and without a draft. I don't think it's been achieved by any other sporting competition in the world. They have achieved without a draft what it takes 2 mechanisms everywhere else to work.
So no need for any change with it?
No, we need, as long as the changes like the long-serving player allowance, that's fine. As long as the changes affect every club equally, I'm in favour of them. But, you know, obviously Canberra can't get as many third-party deals as the Roosters. That's why they're not allowed to have more, because we need to maintain that uncertainty of results every weekend when we show up to watch games.
Steve, I want to ask you about how hard it is to keep top players. I mean, you're talking supporting the cap, but how hard is it to hang on to them? I mean, you've had examples of this.
And our club has shed a number of players over the years. We won a competition back in 2001 and then shed 4 or 5 players over the next couple of years. You know, we probably produced, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, more representative players than any other club we had running around. I think at one stage we had 2.5 first-grade teams playing in the NRL with our own team plus players that we had developed and brought through. Now, we're not a rich club, we're one of the poor clubs. We're one of the clubs that would be destroyed, but Newcastle has a 100-year history in rugby league and has developed players. We've had more Australian players come out of Newcastle than any other district in Australia. It's important that we protect the game and we protect those clubs. Certainly an independent commission will make sure that there's more money in the game and more money flowing back to the clubs. Then the clubs themselves can flow more money back to the players.
Okay, one of the fans up the back. Yep.
What I'd like to know is, we've said a lot tonight about how congested the competition is, and with the teams that miss out of the miss out on the finals by 2 points, and they were beaten by the Storm, don't they have a claim to those 2 points because they were beaten by a team that was illegally formed?
What about the teams that did beat them and they've got the 2 points? Wouldn't they be disadvantaged if you were to give everyone else 2 points?
But didn't the players actually play hard? Didn't the players play for the team?
This is all. We could keep going. We could keep going with this forever.
We are in uncharted territory with the situation this year regarding the Melbourne Storm, but I think David Gallop's job was to look at precedent and consequence, and I think he's done a good job of doing that, and he's come up with the best solution, and I'm yet to hear, since it was handed down, a better one.
Okay, comment over here. Yep.
I just want to say, Bruno Cullen has mentioned a couple of years ago he spoke to the NRL. You're mentioning it has to be tweaked. It seems that the NRL are reactive, not proactive. No, I don't know why does it take situations like this to...
Yeah, it's a good point, Peter, because we have heard stories about things being raised with the NRL and not being acted on.
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't think the salary cap's perfect. A lot of people have been pushing for change for a long time. Changes are made every year. You know, it will never be a perfect system. We will never be able to keep all of our players that we develop in rugby league in this country, and I'm not sure that's necessarily a bad thing. If you go to a rugby league ground above a young age in Australia, you'll see the best athletes playing with an oval ball. The best players that go on to play rugby league, rugby union, that swap codes have come out of rugby league, and that's a fantastic thing. We shouldn't be holding those players back. We shouldn't be holding those players back. Soccer works very well in this country, developing stuff and sending people overseas. We shouldn't view it as only a negative when we lose people.
Okay, I want to shift into other territory before we run out of time. And Tyron, I particularly want to involve you in this because your company's a sponsor of the Storm. You're sticking by them. Another one of the sponsors, ME Bank, has pulled the plug, saying, and the quote is, it believes in the principles of strong governance, transparency, integrity and fairness, and seeks to ensure that all of its corporate and community partnerships uphold those same values. That's its argument for pulling out, its support for the Storm. Are you worried as a sponsor about sticking by this team?
Yeah, look, you know, I understand ME Bank's position completely. For us, I made a phone call to various administrators of the Storm that night. Obviously spoke to a couple of players, and I think as a brand, Kurga, we really represent the players, what's on the field, and we represent the fans. So for us, we heard how devastated the players were, genuinely devastated, how genuinely upset the actual administration was at the Storm. And what Peter said was exactly right. If there's someone in an organisation that wants to fraudulently do something, it's very, very tough to find who that one person is. So we had to look at the Storm as a whole and say, oh, hold on a sec, there's a lot of people that are affected here that have given their guts to the Storm, both on the field and off the field. They do run a professional organisation. It's not just a salary cap driven thing. Just because they've got expensive players, it doesn't mean it's run as a cowboy operation. It's very much a professional organisation. And unfortunately, 1, 2, 3, 4 people that knew about it kept it very tight what was happening. So for us, it was a decision to stay with the players, stay with the supporters, and back the Storm.
What would it take for you to dump them?
If the players had got together, Jason very briefly alluded to it, but if the players had got together and they all knew that, oh, hold on a sec, we know that this guy's over, we know that this guy's over, but let's just keep it quiet, we definitely would reassess our situation.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap up. I just want to get a sense of where to now. Steve, what are you pushing for on this committee? What's going to happen as a result of all of this?
We want to have a look at changes that we can sensibly make. So affordability of the clubs, what changes can make. We need to look at concessions for locally developed juniors and for long-term players at the club. We need to keep as many people in our game as possible, but also remember the game's bigger than the individual.
How do you police it? How do you, I mean, how do you make sure more of this isn't going on?
Well, you can never guarantee it. You'd be dishonest if you said you could guarantee it, but it's just like any business. You put the right culture in place, you put the right policies and procedures and corporate governance in place, you do your audits, and you hope you're dealing with honest people. Every now and then, there will be a dishonest person, but they get caught eventually.
Okay, what do you want from here, Gary?
This all happens while Rome burns, while Nero fiddles while Rome burns. In the meantime, Melbourne are dying on the vine and the fans are being punished every week. This is all very good to make these determinations because they have a lot of long-term sense. They should be made in the off-season when there's time for a convention, but not halfway through a competition.
People handed in their memberships and 1,000 joined.
Yeah,
okay.
That's right. 25,000
what do you think should happen?
At a game last week.
I think we just need to accept that there's no perfect solution here and that we've made a decision, let's move forward. I don't think, I actually think Melbourne are lucky that they've been allowed to keep their players. If we look at what happened to Jonathan Thurston on the weekend, where Melbourne deliberately targeted him, took him out of the game, they're doing that with an illegal roster. They're going to go straight after Darren Lockyer this weekend.
Okay, well, one final comment from Fan. Yep.
You've got ex-coaches here, you've got CEOs of the game here, you've got experts on the NRL, and they can't even understand, and you're saying that 2 teams are the only ones that are inside the salary cap. Well, obviously that needs to be better.
Okay. Are you guys going to stick by this?
Absolutely.
Pay them what they're worth and keep them honest, I say.
Sam?
Pay them what they're worth and keep them honest. I mean, that's what it comes down to. I mean, corporate management does not put a cap on their senior management salaries to make them want to achieve.
Many businesses, though, Sam, have gone back to their workers when they've faced closing down and they've taken salary cuts. So you can't always pay what a person's worth. You can only pay what you can.
And that will happen too.
Okay, we've got to wind it up, but we can keep talking online and you can keep talking to our guests Steve Burriston, Jason Taylor and Sam Ayub. If you're in the eastern states, just hop onto our website and click on the live chat. What do you think about the state of rugby league? I'm interested to hear. Tell us on our Your Say page. And I should point out that we were dead keen to have David Gallop from the NRL here tonight and a News Limited rep as well. Both declined. And we did approach all the rugby league clubs to talk about the state of their game. Only the Knights and the Bunnies agreed to join us. A big thank you for that to both teams. Insight is repeated on Friday at 1:30, again on Monday at 3:30 on SBS 1 and at 7:35 Wednesday night on SBS 2. Next week, anxiety, that horrible feeling of losing control. It can happen anytime and it's very common. So what is anxiety and can it be fixed? Find out next week. Till then, good night.
This is not cheating around the edges. This club has had a couple of rats in its ranks.
As time goes on and all the facts become clear, people can make their own determination.
The Storm has engaged in a long-term system of operating what might